Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, and it's pretty gloomy outside, so I thought I'd light a fire for us to cozy things up a little bit while we talk about Ann Beattie's story, Weekend. I don't know if I did this on purpose or not, but it's interesting that this falls right after James Baldwin's Going to Meet the Man. So that story, of course, was very intense, to say the least. It cut right to the core of the core problem in America of racism, and is tough to read and to even think about and talk about, but important to do. And doing this story right after that one, I have to say these people were frankly annoying, and they were just kind of sitting around and pondering their own belly buttons, which means they're just thinking about their own silly existence and egos, and it's just kind of, they're annoying in that regard. I do think it's a very, very good story. It's very well written. It does capture a certain time period amongst a certain group of people in America, and in the 70s, of sort of post-60s idealism that maybe went a little wrong. But and they're interesting characters nonetheless, and it's actually a very good story to have class discussion about. But I have to say, this is the epitome of first world problems, which is a phrase I learned several years ago about things that we think are problems in our fairly easy lives that really aren't to most people. And certainly this story stands in stark contrast to Going to Meet the Man, which was from a different time period in America. But alas, we have it. It is interesting to talk about. I'm going to quickly grab the questions that you submitted. 3 of you participated in the discussion board. Tamia, thank you very much. Why does George go for younger girls, and why are they his students? Good question. Completely inappropriate. Not the question, what George does. Why does Lenore stay when she knows that George doesn't care about her or their kids? Excellent question. Why does George cheat right in front of Lenore's face? He doesn't even care to hide it. Good job, Tamia. You cut right to the heart of it. Bella, similarly, why did his student agree to casually spend the weekend at his house? Why has Lenore not supposed to see the photographs? The photos are very important. The photos really do symbolize, as you speculated here, Bella, the pain, not so much in their relationship, but George's pain, but we'll work our way back to those. And then Emily had a bunch of questions that we'll work our way around to. So we'll start with Tammy's question. Why does George go for younger girls, and why are they his students? So, and your second question about whether there's an affair going on here. So I guess, is George having, no, I'm sorry. It is George, right? Or is the kid named George? I always get this confused. No, it is George. Is George having sex with these female students who come visit? I don't know. The story is not clear. In some regard, it does not matter. Okay, so it's one of these questions we can debate all day, but at the end of the story, it doesn't really make a big difference. What I think he gets from these kids, and they're not quite kids, they're in their 20s, is they admire him. I mean, they're young, they're still young, they're still naive, and believe me, those of you who are in your 20s, you don't know how young and naive you are until you get older. And I'm still probably young and naive compared to an 80-year-old. It's just the way it goes. You should be growing wiser as you age. But what he gets out of these kids is they think, these young women, is they think he's the best thing ever, right? Sarah defended him when he got basically fired from being a college professor. When you don't get tenure, that's them deciding not to keep you forever, which is pretty much the same thing as getting fired. And she defended him. And she said that they got rid of him because he was so in touch. He was so in touch with everything. Yeah, I think he's in touch with a lot of things he shouldn't be in touch with. But anyway, and they just think he's so suave and sophisticated, and he misses that, of course. He misses being admired by these young women. And you can understand that, but that's not something he should be indulging in, something he should be laughing at. And he still needs that, even though he's a 55-year-old man. So these young women who kept in contact with him, this is long before email, must have done it through phone or letters. He is a good letter writer. Not a bad thing. Being a good letter writer is a good thing. They come to visit for a weekend. And let's face it, anybody can look cool for a weekend, right? George, on the surface, is mostly surface. He is a poser. I'm going to try to put in a definition of poser right here. So George is someone who gets National Geographic, but doesn't really read it. He just wants to seem like he reads it. He admires paintings and artists that a sophisticated person is supposed to admire, not because he really, really does. So he's sort of playing this role of cool, intellectual guy, which anybody can hold up for a weekend. And these young women come and they remember him that way from class, from the university, and he plays that way here, and they all think, oh, he's so great, and he gets a big ego boost. Sad, pathetic. He gets a big ego boost, and then, but ultimately it's not satisfying. I mean, we know before this particular weekend with Sarah and Julie there, we know that he drinks too much and on the weekends, but he was tapering off. Now he's not tapering off anymore. He's drinking through the week. He has an ulcer. His life is not trending up, shall we say. So I think that's why George likes having these young women around, because they think he's awesome. And he's insecure enough, as many people are, and all of us are insecure a little bit. He's insecure. He's so insecure that he needs them to come and look up to him and think he's amazing. When in fact, he's a regular person, just like most of us. Why does Lenore stay with George? Now let's get something straight here about, there's a little hint at where their relationship came from. How old is George? Yes, very good. Thank you, Emily. George is 55, and we know that Lenore is 21 years younger, so Lenore is 34. The story doesn't specifically say that Lenore was one of George's students. However, I think we can certainly postulate that in fact she was. However, she got closer than any of them. He's apparently not going to marry her, and she doesn't seem to care, but she lives with him. He, on that last page of the story, which we'll look at closely, he does sort of reveal his true self, his true inner self to her once he gives up this facade, this front. And this is a good question for you guys to ask yourselves. Who are you with when you are most yourself? Who are you with when you're most yourself? We always put on a face. I don't care who you're with. We always put on a face and a little bit of an act for everyone. But some people you have to do a big act for. You just have to be a person. Maybe you're at a job and you have to play a role. You're getting paid to be that. That's fine. But hopefully maybe with family, your best friend, your significant other, you can be as yourself as much as possible. And George is himself as much as he can be with Lenore, certainly not with the women who visit. So Lenore, I think Lenore gets something out of these visits also. Lenore gets to see phony George, and she puts up with it, But then she gets to be, very close to him, and she gets to see that he's real with her. And we'll cut right to this very important symbol of the photographs, right? So Julie, who comes along with Sarah, more a friend of Sarah's than a friend of George's, has this really nice conversation with Lenore. And let's face it, Lenore keeps things pretty superficial for the most part also. And Julie cracks that, right? Julie says, "I'd never have the courage to live with a man and not marry." Now here's an interesting side note for you. This story, written in 1978, it was still like, ooh, people, man, woman, not married, living together, yee. Now it's unusual for a man and woman not to live together, or as I like to say, shack up, before getting married. It's even, old people are like, yeah, whatever. But it was like, ooh, a big deal, big deal in the 70s. "I'd never have the courage to live with a man and not marry," Julie says. "I mean, I wish I had, that we hadn't got married, but I just don't have that kind of, I'm not secure enough." You have to live somewhere, Lenore says. Now that kind of answer is humorous. Yeah, you got to live somewhere. It's dismissive, right? Julie's bringing up a serious thing. And you don't want to do this, right? This is almost like Dexter Green in his superficiality. Lenore can't tell anymore if she's sincere or not. You have to live somewhere. There's a reason she's with him. Now, I think she recognizes this, right? When she says that, Julie is looking at her as if she does not believe that she is sincere. Am I? Lenore wonders. She has lived with George for 6 years, and sometimes she thinks she has caught his way of playing games with herself. Now, who is George fooling the most? George, right? So when someone's a big old phony, feel sorry for them, right? That they can't be themselves. So Lenore said, you know what? She's going to actually tell the truth here. Tell the truth here about these photos. "I'll show you something," Lenore says. She gets up and Julie follows. Lenore puts on the light in George's study, and they walk through it to a bathroom he's converted into a darkroom. This is before digital photography. Lenore takes them out, and under a table in a box behind another box, there's a stack of pictures. Lenore takes them out and hands them to Julie. They are pictures that Lenore found in his darkroom last summer. They were left out by mistake, no doubt, and she found them when she went in with some contact prints he had left in their bedroom. They're high contrast photos, so stark black and white, of George's face. In all of them, he looks very serious and very sad. In some of them, his eyes seem to be narrowed in pain. In one, his mouth is open. It's an excellent photograph of a man in agony, a man about to scream. So what are we looking at here? Yeah, selfies, right? George was one of the first selfies. This is the equivalent of one of you taking pictures of yourself, making different faces into your cell phone camera, and then looking at them and exploring who you are. You see it on people's Instagram feeds and Facebook and Insta whatever all the time. So, they look. This is George almost forcing himself to feel in agony, taking a picture of himself and then keeping it and looking at it, right? I don't know. I'm not in agony, so it's hard to fake agony. I don't think it's quite that bad. But at any rate, this is a selfie, right? George has done selfies here. Pictures he took of himself, Lenore says. "So I stay." Julie nods. So I stay. So even though George generally does not reveal what's inside him to Lenore, she at least knows there's something there. And he's always covering it over with his posing, trying to seem like the suave, cool intellectual that he can be, but there's something inauthentic, not real about the George. So we'll hold that thought right there.